Ancient Egypt is often boxed into neat categories: monumental pyramids, golden treasures, mummies wrapped in linen. Yet beneath that familiar exterior lies a living blueprint, a secret schematic for the evolution of consciousness. This civilization didn't erect structures merely to bury the dead or flaunt power. Every stone, every corridor, every hieroglyph was purpose-built to transform the human spirit. When you stand before the Great Pyramid at Giza, you're not gazing at an inert tomb, but at a resonant field engineered to recalibrate your mind and body. The ancient builders understood that space shapes thought, that geometry carries frequency, and that architecture can function as living technology. Their monuments were laboratories of initiation, chambers of sound and silence designed to guide an individual through layers of symbolic death and rebirth. In other words, Egypt was never just a place. It was a doorway, and those doorways still stand today, waiting to activate the dormant potential within us. Most visitors arrive expecting dusty relics and stale history lessons. They see ramps of stone leading to dark vestibules, panels of carved gods, and assume these are mere decorations or superstitions. Schoolrooms reinforce the same narrow story: pyramids built by slave labor, pharaohs obsessed with death, priests enforcing oppressive ritual. But what if that narrative was a diversion? What if the real secret was intentionally overshadowed? The truth is, the Egyptians guarded their deepest teachings, knowledge about vibration, frequency, sacred geometry, and the mechanics of the soul, behind layers of symbolism. They spoke openly of gods and kings, but only the truly initiated perceived those names as codes. Thoth wasn't just a deity of writing, he was the symbol of inner intelligence. Isis wasn't just motherhood and magic, she was the principle of resurrection encoded in every cell. When understood properly, every myth becomes a mirror reflecting the inner landscape of your own consciousness. To appreciate this hidden blueprint, we must start with the temples themselves. Walk into Karnak or Luxor, and you're not entering a museum. You're stepping into a living circuit. Massive stone columns, carved with spiraling lotus and papyrus motifs, form repeating sequences that mirror brainwave patterns. Light filters through precisely aligned openings, creating bands of illumination that shift throughout the day, tracking the sun's passage and marking moments ideal for meditation or ceremony. Acoustics within inner sanctums amplify specific frequencies. A simple chant at the right pitch can resonate through the chamber, vibrating the limestone walls and creating standing waves that flush out mental clutter. These weren't accidental effects. They were engineered. The Egyptians knew how to harness material properties: limestone's piezoelectric qualities, granite's ability to store energy under pressure, to build fields that could awaken subtle layers of perception. In essence, they were crafting analog computers for the soul. Central to this design is the Nile River itself. More than a lifeline for agriculture, the Nile represented the path of the soul ascending from darkness into light. Each year, its floodwaters submerged the land in fertile silt, only to recede and reveal new growth. This cyclical death and rebirth pattern was mirrored in the human journey. To achieve spiritual renewal, one must first surrender to the currents of the unconscious, letting old structures dissolve before rising again. Temples were often situated along the riverbank so that priests could perform rites at dawn, aligning offerings with the flow, invoking the living waters as a symbol of purification. Ceremonial barges, ornate with solar motifs, would carry statues of gods downstream in nightly processions, moving images meant to awaken the bar, spirit, within each observer, inviting them to traverse inner realms as the boat glided through outer ones. At the center of this entire system stood the pharaoh, not simply as a divinely appointed monarch, but as a master initiate. Before donning the double crown, each king underwent rigorous training in the hidden sciences: astronomy, numerology, herbal alchemy, and vibrational therapy. He studied the patterns of Orion's belt, mapping those stars onto the three chambers of the Great Pyramid. learned to chant precise tonal sequences that attuned his auditory centers to cosmic harmonics, and practiced meditative rites in underground chambers where total darkness expelled every trace of ego. His regalia, the crook and flail, the uraeus cobra, the anklet beard, were not mere ornaments but mnemonic devices encoding universal principles: compassion fused with authority, divine wisdom balanced by human will, mortality transcended through aligned purpose. The coronation ceremony itself was a sonic ritual, with priests chanting in unison to anchor the king's consciousness into the lattice of the heavens. Symbols and hieroglyphs across walls and papyri carried layers of meaning, far beyond literal translations. A carved lotus could denote rebirth, yes, but also reveal the fractal pattern of reality, showing how a single shape repeats infinitely at every scale. The Eye of Horus wasn't just a protective emblem. Its 6 parts correspond to the brain's 6 major lobes, indicating an ancient understanding of neuroanatomy and higher perception. Even the wings of Isis painted above palace doors were visual frequency codes. When your mind relaxed and your third eye opened, those shapes activated subtle centers of insight. Initiates learned to read these symbols, not with rational intellect, but with inner sight, allowing the glyphs to trigger shifts in brain chemistry, releasing endorphins and other neurotransmitters that opened doors to transcendent states. Perhaps the most compelling evidence of cosmic alignment is found in the pyramids themselves. The Great Pyramid's base is aligned almost perfectly to the 4 cardinal points, and its sides are angled to match the slopes of Orion's 3-star belt. Within, the king's chamber resonates at a frequency that amplifies the human voice, while the so-called air shafts point directly toward key stars in Orion and Sirius. This celestial correspondence wasn't decoration. It was a living map, demonstrating the law of as above, so below. By positioning his monument at the center of Earth's landmass, the pharaoh anchored a nexus, an energetic node, through which universal intelligence could flow into the terrestrial realm. Standing at its core, the initiate could, in theory, tap into that cosmic river and experience a direct communion with the source of creation. Initiation itself was a multi-layered journey through physical, emotional, and spiritual chambers. Novices entered dark corridors, symbolic of the underworld, carrying only a simple lamp to ward off fear until they reached a narrow slit of light, symbolizing the emergence of awareness. In inner chambers, silence reigned for days if not weeks, forcing the mind into deep introspection until all habitual thought patterns dissolved. Ritual water was poured over the initiate's head in precise measures, each droplet carrying a vibrational code intended to wash away emotional blockages. Ceremonial dances, accompanied by frame drums and sistrums, built kinetic energy in the body and then released it in fractal patterns, aligning the physical vessel to higher dimensional templates. Every stage of this rite echoed the soul's passage from ignorance into illumination, from fragmentation into unity. Crucially, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, often mistranslated as the Book of the Dead, wasn't a manual for the afterlife alone. It was a user's guide for living fully awake in the present. Each spell, whether to ward off chaos, to invoke Ma'at's harmony, or to call upon Ra's life-giving force, was a sonic key, a phrase calibrated to open specific doors within one's own psyche. Reciting these lines wasn't rote memorization. It was an act of resonance. Proper pronunciation and intent activated neural pathways, triggering altered states conducive to self-illumination. In that sense, the Egyptians weren't obsessed with death. They revered it as a passage, a transition into a subtler form of awareness. And by mastering those transitions while alive, they aimed to pre-experience the continuity of consciousness beyond the body. Today, as modern science rediscovers quantum non-locality, entanglement, and multidimensionality, we're finally catching up to what the Egyptians practiced intuitively. What they called magic was simply applied consciousness engineering, using sound, light, geometry, and intention to shape reality rather than be shaped by it. Their temples still hum with that latent power, Anyone sensitive enough can feel the change in their own vibrational field simply by entering a holy precinct. Even the defaced or collapsed structures whisper secrets through remaining glyphs and alignments, waiting for those ready to look beyond surface symbolism into underlying patterns. This hidden roadmap to immortality remains intact, encoded within stone and story. When you study these monuments not as relics of a bygone era, but as active gateways, you begin to sense a living intelligence pulsing through history and into your own life. The journey of discovery doesn't end in Egypt's deserts. It begins there, in the recognition that you too are a walking temple. Every cell in your body holds the same sacred geometry, every breath the same potential vibration. The ancient builders understood that by harmonizing personal awareness with cosmic patterns, one could transcend limitations of time and form. And so, even now, as you read these words, you stand at the threshold of remembrance. In ancient Egypt, temples were far more than places of worship. They were complex machines, spiritual engines designed to elevate the human soul and align it with the cosmos. Each temple was a reflection of both the outer universe and the inner, human landscape. Every column, chamber, and corridor was intentional, constructed with exact measurements based on sacred geometry and astronomical alignments. These were not passive spaces but dynamic environments, created to initiate personal transformation and spiritual rebirth. The ancients didn't build with faith alone, they built with knowledge. A precise, experiential knowledge of how vibration, sound, light, and spatial awareness could work together to awaken deeper dimensions of human consciousness. The temple was a journey in itself. When you entered an Egyptian temple, you stepped into a narrative, a symbolic progression from darkness into light, from ignorance into illumination. It started at the pylon, the massive gateway that symbolized the threshold between the mundane and the sacred. Its towering walls were not only imposing, but metaphoric. You had to surrender your ego and step into the unknown. Often covered in carvings of pharaohs subduing chaos, these gateways were initiatory filters. Only those with the right intention could proceed inward. The moment you passed through, you weren't just walking into a building. You were moving through dimensions of consciousness, stage by stage, like a soul traveling through the afterlife. Behind the pylon, the hypostyle hall awaited. This was a forest of stone columns, often covered in detailed reliefs of gods, kings, and sacred plants. But these columns were more than decoration. They were designed to mimic the papyrus swamps of creation, where life first emerged. Walking among them was meant to induce a trance-like state, a reverent stillness where you could feel the original moment of birth, not just of the world, but of your own spirit. The air inside was thick with incense, itself crafted from specific herbs and resins known to open the pineal gland and relax the nervous system. Soft light filtered through high slits in the stone, creating shafts of illumination that moved with the sun. These weren't just architectural features. They were timekeepers, guiding rituals based on solar and stellar cycles. The further you moved into the temple, the darker and quieter it became. This mirrored the process of inner initiation. The noise of the world faded away, and the seeker was left with their breath, their heartbeat, and the subtle energies of the space itself. The sanctuaries at the heart of the temple were small and secluded, and it was here that the mysteries were encountered. Only the highest priests or initiates were allowed inside these sacred chambers, not to keep others out of power, but because entering unprepared could be dangerous. These rooms weren't just symbolically powerful, they were vibrationally charged. Walls made of granite, a stone known for its high quartz content, conducted energy. When specific words were spoken at exact tones, the room would vibrate, amplifying the frequency and bathing the initiate in sound and light. Everything was engineered to affect your subtle body, the energetic counterpart of your physical form. Just as acupuncture maps out meridians and chakras in the body, The Egyptians mapped out the energy flows of space. Their temples aligned with ley lines, energetic currents running beneath the earth, and used orientation, sound, and color to open gateways in consciousness. This was sacred engineering, long lost to the modern world, but still embedded in the stones. Modern researchers have found that chanting inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, for example, produces resonance frequencies that match the human heart and brainwave activity. The same is true of many temples. They weren't built for show, but for transformation. The priests were not mere ceremonial figures. They were technicians of the sacred. Each ritual was a protocol, each movement calibrated to access specific states of awareness. They would rise before dawn, cleanse themselves with natron and sacred waters, dress in white linen to reflect purity, and chant in harmonic tones that activated the geometry of the space. Every sound was a frequency code, every incense a vibrational key. They didn't pray as we understand it. They enacted rituals that harmonized the human body with the greater cosmic rhythms. When they invoked deities like Thoth or Sekhmet, they weren't summoning external beings, but archetypal energies within themselves and the initiate. The symbols carved into the walls held multiple meanings. A scarab beetle wasn't just a sign of luck. It symbolized the power of transformation, as the beetle pushes a ball of dung in which new life emerges. The Ankh, often called the key of life, was a literal key, its loop representing the eternal soul, the crossbar the material, world and the stem the pathway between them. Holding it in ritual acted as an energetic antenna, helping to conduct spiritual energy. Hieroglyphs weren't letters, they were holographic symbols, activating different areas of the brain and subconscious. An initiate who meditated on these forms in the right state could unlock memories, visions, and inner knowledge. Beyond the spiritual, these temples also held secrets of medicine, astronomy, and energy. Reliefs on temple walls depict surgical tools, references to the pineal gland, and planetary movements with extraordinary accuracy. The ceilings of Dendera Temple, for example, hold a zodiac that accurately maps star constellations still used today. The temple's underground crypt contains images of what modern viewers claim resemble electric lights. Symbolic or not, they suggest the Egyptians had knowledge of subtle energy long before modern science. And more than once, modern scientists have detected unexplained electromagnetic anomalies in these temple spaces, especially those constructed from granite or basalt. Yet perhaps the most profound mystery of the temples lies in their longevity. These structures have survived thousands of years, not just due to engineering genius, but because they were built to last spiritually. Their alignments to solstices, equinoxes, and star systems ensure that they are forever connected to the pulse of the cosmos. You could think of them as spiritual satellites, fixed stations receiving cosmic data and transmitting it to those able to tune in. Their very existence today is a testament to the power of intentional architecture. And those who visit with open hearts often report strange synchronicities, vivid dreams, emotional releases, or spontaneous insights, signs that the temples are still active, still working on subtle planes. When we look at these temples today, we see beauty and grandeur. But if we look closer, if we walk them slowly with reverence and let the geometry speak to us, we begin to hear the whisper of our own soul echoed in stone. These were not built just for the elite or the royal. They were built for you, for the future generations who would one day return to remember, to stand again in the ancient light and reclaim the sacred truth, that you are not separate from the universe, but a reflection of its brilliance. And that through harmony with your own body, your own breath, and your own intention, you too can become a temple, a living vessel of spirit, grounded in earth and open to the stars. In the heart of ancient Egypt, the concept of the soul was not just spiritual, it was scientific, structured, and deeply layered. Unlike modern interpretations, where the soul is often seen as a single invisible entity that lives within the body, the Egyptians saw the human being as a multidimensional, being composed of several distinct elements. Each part of the soul had a specific function, energy, and spiritual significance. These aspects were not symbolic. They were real forces, energies that could be nurtured, lost, or transformed, depending on how one lived their life and engaged in spiritual practice. The ancient Egyptians believed that a human was made up of at least 9 parts, though some sources mention up to 14. Each part represented a different aspect of existence: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and divine. The major components include the Ka, Ba, Ak, Ren, Shayut, Ib, and Sekum. Each had its own journey after death, its own purpose in life, and its own relationship to the divine. Let's explore these powerful elements one by one, and in doing so, uncover a vision of humanity that is far more complex and mystical than modern psychology or religion typically allows. The Ka was your vital life force, your double, your energy body, the spark of divine breath that animated your physical form. It was created at birth and remained with you until death. But it didn't vanish when the body died. It continued to exist in the spiritual world, requiring offerings and nourishment, much like a living being. In fact, all the food and drink placed in tombs was meant not for the physical body, but for the Ka. Without sustenance, the Ka could wither, causing the soul to lose its stability in the afterlife. Temples and tombs were built as spiritual habitats for the Ka. Statues of the deceased served as vessels where the Ka could reside. The Ka was the aspect of you that connected to divine order, or Ma'at. If you lived a life in harmony with truth, balance, and compassion, your Ka would be strong. If you lived with deceit, selfishness, or cruelty, your Ka would be weakened. In essence, the Ka was the blueprint of your spiritual health. It was the part of you most attuned to cosmic energy, the part that felt love, awe, purpose, and devotion.
While the Ka was the life force, the Ba was your personality, your unique character, your emotional self, and your spiritual individuality. It was often depicted as a human-headed bird, symbolizing its ability to fly freely between the worlds of the living and the dead. After death, the Ba would leave the tomb during the day, travel to sacred sites, commune with loved ones, and return at night to reunite with the body. It was the Ba that retained your memories, emotions, and personal quirks. Your laughter, your preferences, your voice, all of these lived in the Ba. But the Ba was not merely a ghostly imprint of who you were. It was a traveler, a seeker. In life, it could be activated through deep meditation, prayer, or ritual, allowing the practitioner to access higher knowledge and spiritual realms. In dreams, the Ba could leave the body and explore other dimensions. Shamans and priests would sometimes train to consciously project their Ba, using chants, herbs, or silence to open the doorway between worlds. In the afterlife, the Ba would eventually reunite with the Ka, forming the Ak, a transfigured soul. The Ak was the highest form the soul could take, an immortal, radiant being of light. To become an Ak was the ultimate spiritual goal in Egyptian cosmology. This was the fully awakened soul, unified with divine intelligence. It was no longer subject to the cycles of reincarnation or decay. It was a star in the night sky, a being of eternal consciousness. The Ak could move freely through all dimensions of existence and even influence events in the world of the living. To become an Ak, the individual had to pass the judgment of Osiris, the famous weighing of the heart ceremony. If one's heart, representing truth, was lighter than the feather of Mayat, symbolizing divine order, the soul was granted access to the eternal fields of peace, known as the Field of Reeds. If not, the soul faced annihilation, not eternal. Punishment but spiritual oblivion. This was a cosmic law, not a punishment. The Ak was the fusion of the Ka and Ba, awakened and transformed through truth, love, and spiritual discipline. It was the perfected self, the divine human. Your Ren, or name, was not just a label, it was your essence. The Egyptians believed that as long as your name was spoken, your soul would live on. This is why tombs and monuments were inscribed with the names of the deceased. To erase someone's name was considered the ultimate form of spiritual death, a condemnation to oblivion. On the other hand, to speak someone's name in prayer or ritual was to call them forth, to reconnect with their energy across time and space. The wren had magical power. It was said that to know the true name of a god was to hold power over that god. This belief was not about dominance, but about resonance. Names vibrated with energy. They carried the frequency of the soul. Egyptian priests often used secret or sacred names in rituals, encoded in glyphs or whispers, to invoke divine forces. Even today, in many mystical traditions, names are used as mantras or keys to open deeper awareness. Your wren was your soul's fingerprint in the universe, utterly unique, deeply personal, and eternally powerful. The shayut or shadow was both literal and symbolic. Literally, it was your shadow, your dark twin, always following, always watching. Symbolically, it represented your unconscious mind, your fears, your secrets, and your hidden desires. But the shayut was not evil. In fact, it was essential. It held the parts of your psyche you couldn't see or didn't want to see. By understanding your shayut, you could become whole. The shayut also protected you. Many magical texts were inscribed on papyrus and buried with the deceased to protect their shayut in the afterlife. The idea was to balance the light and the shadow, to know both joy and sorrow, clarity and mystery. Spiritual maturity in Egyptian thought came from accepting and integrating your shayut, not suppressing it. Some initiates were even said to confront their own shadows in ritual, entering dark tombs or chambers to face the parts of themselves hidden in fear or denial. The ib, or heart, was considered the seat of thought, emotion, and moral judgment. Unlike today, where we place the mind in the brain, the Egyptians placed consciousness in the heart. Every decision, every emotion, every memory was stored in the ib. That's why, in the afterlife, it was the ib, not the brain, that was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. The heart could not lie. If it was heavy with wrongdoing, the soul was devoured by the monster Amit. The heart was so sacred that during mummification it was carefully preserved or replaced with a sacred scarab amulet. These heart scarabs were inscribed with protective spells from the Book of the Dead, ensuring that the heart would not betray the deceased during judgment. In life, maintaining a pure ib meant living in alignment with truth, kindness, and harmony. A cleansed heart was the key to an eternal soul. The second was the spiritual power or life force that animated both gods and humans. It was divine fire, creative energy, the spark that allowed miracles and transformation. While the ka was your vitality, the second was your spiritual voltage. It could be increased through prayer, ritual, service, and love. High priests and priestesses were trained to cultivate Sekhem, using it to heal others, bless objects, or awaken dormant spiritual faculties. Some temples even had Sekhem chambers, special spaces designed to amplify this energy. The idea was that when your Sekhem was strong, you could heal not just yourself but others, and even the land around you. The gods were said to radiate Sekhem in pure form, and many rituals were designed to help humans align with this current. Sekhem was the flame of the divine within you, the power to transform not just your own destiny, but the world itself. When all parts of the soul were balanced and activated, the person became a living temple, a microcosm of the divine cosmos. Life was a preparation for eternity. Every act, every word, every intention carried weight. But it was not about guilt or fear. It was about responsibility, beauty, and purpose. To be alive was to carry a divine gift. To die was not an end, but a transformation into higher states of being. The Egyptians were not obsessed with death. They were obsessed with eternal life in its truest sense, not immortality of the body, but the awakening of the soul. Their understanding of the soul wasn't based on dogma. It was based on observation, experience, and inner knowing. Through meditation, ritual, dream work, and sacred science, they explored the inner dimensions of the human being with a precision that rivals any modern psychology or metaphysics. They left us a map, a detailed, symbolic, and vibrational map of who we truly are beneath the surface of flesh and bone. This is the forgotten science of the soul, and when we begin to remember it, not just intellectually but experientially, we step into a living stream of ancient wisdom that flows through time, space, and spirit. A stream that calls us to awaken the Ka within, to free the Ba, to become the Ak, to protect the Ren, to understand the Sheut, to purify the Ib, and to ignite the Sekem. When we do, we become whole again. We become timeless. We become divine. In ancient Egypt, the gods were not merely distant deities to be worshipped in fear or reverence. They were living symbols, archetypes that represented aspects of the soul, the universe, and the divine principles that governed reality. Every god had a deeper spiritual meaning, and each one reflected something within us. To understand Egyptian mythology is to look into a sacred mirror, a reflection of your own inner landscape. The gods were cosmic forces, spiritual truths wrapped in story and symbol. They appeared in animal forms, human bodies, or hybrid shapes not for fantasy, but to communicate in the language of energy and consciousness. Their animal heads or symbolic tools weren't literal but energetic. They showed what that god represented at a soul level. In this part, we'll explore some of the most significant Egyptian gods and uncover the hidden meanings they reveal about human transformation, spiritual evolution, and the soul's journey. Osiris is perhaps the most important figure in Egyptian mythology. He is the ruler of the underworld and the judge of souls, but more than that, he is the embodiment of rebirth. His story is central to Egyptian spirituality. Murdered by his jealous brother Set, dismembered, and then resurrected by the love and magic of his wife, Isis. Osiris represents the soul's eternal nature, the truth that even when we die, we are reborn. At a deeper level, Osiris symbolizes the inner God within us all, the part of us that can never die, the part that rises from suffering and loss. His death represents our descent into the darkness of life's challenges, and his resurrection represents the spiritual awakening that follows. Osiris is your higher self, the divine, wise presence that remains stable through chaos. Isis is the goddess of magic, motherhood, healing, and sacred knowledge. She is the divine feminine in her highest form. Her name literally means throne, which shows her deep connection to spiritual authority. In the story of Osiris, she is the one who reassembles his body and breathes life back into him. In this way, she symbolizes the soul's power to heal and restore what has been broken. Isis is also the mother of Horus, the divine child, making her a symbol of inner rebirth. Her presence in Egyptian temples was often invoked for protection, spiritual awakening, and feminine wisdom. Spiritually, Isis lives in all of us as the force of intuition, unconditional love, and mystical knowing. When you listen to your heart, dream deeply, or awaken psychic insight, you are touching the energy of Isis. Horus, the falcon-headed god, is the son of Isis and Osiris. He represents victory over darkness, divine kingship, and the awakened inner self. His battle with Set, the god of chaos, represents the spiritual struggle within all of us. Set is our lower nature, our shadow, our ego. Horus is the higher nature, our spiritual will, our awakened consciousness. When you overcome fear, selfishness, or illusion, you become like Horus. He is the eye that sees all, and the eye of Horus, often used as a protective amulet, represents awakened perception. Horus is not just a warrior. He is the child of spiritual union. He represents the result of love, Isis, and wisdom, Osiris. When you bring love and truth together in your life, your soul gives birth to Horus. Set, often seen as the villain of Egyptian myth, is the god of chaos, storms, and violence. But like all shadow figures, his role is essential. Set represents the disruptive energy that destroys old structures, so new ones can emerge. He is the darkness that challenges us to grow. In the spiritual journey, Set is not to be feared but understood. He is the ego, the resistance to truth, the temptation to stay asleep. But without Set, there is no transformation. Set tests Horus, but in doing so, he helps awaken him. Set lives within us as doubt, anger, ambition, and fear. The path of wisdom is not to suppress Set, but to face him, to integrate his energy and turn it toward conscious purpose. Thoth, the ibis-headed god, is the master of writing, wisdom, time, and sacred law. He is credited with creating hieroglyphs and recording the judgments of souls in the afterlife. But beyond myth, Thoth represents the inner teacher, the part of us that seeks knowledge, truth, and divine law. Thoth is the mind awakened by spirit, not just intellect, but wisdom born of experience. When you meditate, write deeply, or receive sudden insight, that is Thoth at work. In Egyptian legend, Thoth was the keeper of the Book of Life, a mystical book containing all knowledge of the universe. That book, symbolically, is within you. To walk the spiritual path is to open that inner book and begin reading its pages. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, is the protector of the dead and the guide of souls. He oversees the embalming process and leads the soul through the underworld. But Anubis is more than a god of death. He is the spiritual guide through transformation. He walks with you through your darkest moments, not to harm you, but to help you transition into a new state of being. He is the guardian of the threshold. In spiritual terms, Anubis is with you whenever you leave an old version of yourself behind. Loss after awakening, after profound inner change, his presence teaches us that death is not the end, it is the doorway. And with the right guide, even the most painful changes can become sacred. Ma'at is the cosmic principle of truth, harmony, and balance. She is not just a goddess, she is the law of the universe. Her feather is used in the judgment of the soul. If your heart is lighter than her feather, you are in harmony with divine truth. To live in Ma'at is to live with integrity, compassion, balance, and spiritual clarity. She is the foundation of all Egyptian spirituality. When we live selfishly or dishonestly, we fall out of Ma'at, and chaos, Set, begins to dominate. When we realign with truth, we return to harmony. In this way, Ma'at is the inner compass of the soul. She is always present, whispering to us to choose the path of love, clarity, and justice. Each of these gods is more than just a character in a story. They are archetypes of consciousness, mirrors of the soul's journey through awakening. Within you, Osiris is the divine self, Isis is your inner healer, Horus is your higher vision, Set is your ego, Thoth is your wisdom, Anubis is your guide through change, and Ma'at is your moral compass. The Egyptian temple was not just a house for gods, it was a reflection of the human being. To walk the Egyptian spiritual path was to become divine, not by worshipping outside deities, but by awakening the gods within. These myths were not fantasies, they were initiations, designed to guide the soul through its own evolution. As you study the gods, you begin to understand yourself. As you honor them, you awaken their qualities inside you. In this way, the Egyptian gods are not forgotten relics. They are living energies still vibrating within the soul of humanity, waiting to be remembered. In ancient Egypt, temples were far more than places of worship. They were living symbols, cosmic machines, and initiation, centers designed to awaken the divine self within each person. These massive structures, carved in stone and aligned with celestial bodies, were carefully built, not only to honor the gods, but to transform the soul of the seeker. Every column, chamber, statue, and wall carving was layered with hidden messages. Temples were spiritual blueprints, designed to reflect the structure of the universe, the soul, and the path of enlightenment. When you walked through a temple, you weren't just entering a holy building. You were stepping into a sacred journey, moving from the outer world into the deepest parts of your inner being. The layout of ancient Egyptian temples mirrors the stages of spiritual awakening. You begin in the outer courtyard, open to the sky, exposed to the elements. This is the realm of the physical world, where everyday life takes place. But as you walk deeper, you move into enclosed spaces, darker, quieter, and more mysterious. Each doorway you pass through is symbolic. It represents a shift in consciousness. Finally, at the very heart of the temple, you reach the sanctuary, a small hidden chamber where the statue of the god rests. This inner room represents the innermost self, the divine spark within you. Only the high priests who had undergone years of training and purification were allowed to enter. This was not out of fear, but because spiritual power requires purity, readiness, and understanding. The deeper message: you are the temple, your body is the outer courtyard, your mind is the inner chambers, and your soul, the true you, is the hidden sanctuary. To enter that inner sanctuary, you must purify, awaken, and align yourself with truth. Egyptian temples were built with incredible precision. Many were aligned with solstices, star risings, or cardinal directions. For example, the Temple of Karnak aligns with the winter solstice sunrise, allowing light to penetrate deep into the temple only on that special day. The Temple of Dendera was aligned with Sirius, the star associated with Isis and rebirth. This wasn't just astronomical knowledge, it was spiritual science. The Egyptians believed that aligning structures with the cosmos allowed divine energy to flow through them. The stars, sun, and planets weren't just physical bodies, they were living forces, reflections of divine consciousness. By aligning with them, the temple became a bridge between heaven and earth. Even the dimensions of temples were significant. The numbers used in their construction often held symbolic meaning. Numbers like 3, representing creation, 4, stability, 7, spiritual completion, and 12, cosmic order. The heights of columns, the shapes of halls, the placement of obelisks, all were part of a sacred code meant to speak directly to the soul. Many temples also served as mystery schools, hidden places where selected students were trained in spiritual wisdom, meditation, energy work, healing, and divine law. These teachings weren't written down for the public. They were passed orally, through experience and ritual, to those who were ready to receive them. Initiates would go through symbolic death and rebirth. They would be tested in dark chambers, face illusions, confront their fears, and receive visions. They would fast, meditate, study sacred geometry and cosmic laws. Some temples even had hidden underground rooms used for dream initiation or ritual purification. These weren't just ceremonies, they were psychological and spiritual transformations. At the heart of these teachings was the idea that the divine is within. The goal of the mystery schools was not to gain power or miracles, but to become a living embodiment of Ma'at, to awaken the God within, and to live in harmony with divine truth. Egyptian temples were also centers of healing. People came to be cured not only physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Sacred pools were used for purification. Priests trained in energy healing and herbal medicine performed rituals. Incantations were chanted to shift consciousness and awaken inner light. The vibrations of spoken words, music, and symbols were believed to realign the soul. The Temple of Komombo, for example, was associated with medicine and healing. It even contains carvings that resemble surgical instruments, and the priests there were known as healers. The idea was simple. True healing requires alignment with the divine self. When the soul is at peace and balanced, the body and mind follow. The Uhi. Most powerful message behind the Egyptian temples is this: you are the temple. Your body holds sacred energy centers. Your mind is the initiatory hall where you face illusions and learn truth. Your soul is the hidden sanctuary. Just like the temple, you are a structure of light, energy, and sacred design. When you meditate, when you speak with love, when you align with truth, you activate that inner temple. You open the gateways to divine wisdom. You become the priest, the initiate, the God within. So the next time you see an image of an ancient temple, don't just admire the stonework. See it as a symbol of what you are becoming. A vessel of divine light, a house of the spirit, a gateway to eternity. In ancient Egypt, symbols weren't just decorations or art. They were a living language of the soul, capable of unlocking hidden truths, shifting consciousness, and guiding the seeker on the path to spiritual awakening. Every symbol carved on temple walls, painted in tombs, or worn as an amulet had layers of meaning, both outer and inner. To the Egyptians, these were not just signs, they were portals, keys to higher knowledge. They believed that symbols held real power. They didn't just represent ideas, they were the ideas. To look at a symbol, to meditate on it, was to touch the divine essence behind it. And for those who had the wisdom to decode them, these symbols revealed the secrets of life, death, and the cosmos. One of the most famous Egyptian symbols is the Ankh, a cross with a loop at the top. Often held by gods and pharaohs, the Ankh represented life, but not just physical life, it meant eternal life, the life force that flows through all things. The loop symbolizes the soul or spirit, and the cross below it represents the physical world. Together, the Ankh shows the union of heaven and earth, spirit and matter. To hold the Ankh is to hold the power of creation, healing, and immortality. Even today, many people wear the Ankh as a symbol of spiritual strength and awakening. The Eye of Horus, or Wedjat, is a powerful symbol of protection, wisdom, and inner sight. In the myth, Horus lost his eye in battle with Set, the god of chaos. Later, the eye was restored by the god Thoth, becoming a symbol of healing and wholeness. But it's more than just a myth. The Eye of Horus is also a map of the third eye, the pineal gland, and the higher faculties of perception. The 6 parts of the eye in Egyptian art even represent the 6 senses: sight, hearing, thought, smell, taste, and touch. To focus on the Eye of Horus is to awaken your inner vision, to see beyond illusion and access deep intuitive knowledge. The scarab beetle was sacred to the Egyptians because it symbolized rebirth. Just as the scarab rolls dung across the ground and creates life from it, the Egyptians believed the soul could roll through the darkness and rise again, transformed. It was often placed in tombs and used in jewelry to remind the soul that death is not the end. It is simply a doorway to a higher form of life. The scarab also represented the movement of the sun, the journey of the soul, and the power of transformation through will and faith. Egyptian hieroglyphs weren't just a writing system, they were spells in motion. Each symbol was a picture, a sound, and a force. Words had power, and to speak or write the right ones in the right way was to shape reality. Priests and scribes trained for years to understand the mystical use of language. A single name, written on a wall, could protect a tomb or curse an enemy. A sacred text inscribed on a statue could breathe divine life into it. The word for to speak, MDW, was the same root as to create. In other words, to speak truth was to create truth. All of these symbols, the Ankh, the eye, the scarab, the hieroglyphs, remind us that truth is layered. To the casual viewer, a symbol is just a shape, but to the awakened mind, it is a door, a reminder that the universe speaks not just in words but in images, feelings, and intuition. The Egyptians knew that symbols bypass the logical mind and go straight to the soul. They speak in dreams, in synchronicities, in flashes of understanding. By meditating on them, living with them, honoring them, you align yourself with their power. To see as the ancients saw is to look with the heart. To understand that the universe is a mirror, and every symbol is a reflection of the divine within you. In ancient Egypt, rituals were not mere traditions. They were cosmic technologies, carefully crafted to align the human soul with the eternal rhythms of the universe. Each movement, word, and offering carried divine significance. These sacred acts were designed to open spiritual gates, cleanse negative energies, and connect the seen with the unseen. For the ancient Egyptians, life was not separated from spirit. Every action, from washing the body to lighting incense, could become a ritual if performed with intention and sacred awareness. Through ritual, one could harmonize with Ma'at, the divine order of the cosmos, and draw closer to the Neteru, gods, the ancestral spirits, and the eternal self. At the heart of every ritual was the concept of Ma'at, truth, balance, justice, and cosmic harmony. Ma'at wasn't just an idea, she was a goddess, a force that kept the universe in order. Every temple ceremony, every offering and every prayer was designed to uphold Ma'at, to keep balance between chaos and order. To live in accordance with Ma'at meant living a life of honesty, purity, and balance. Rituals were the tools used to realign the individual soul with this universal principle. They cleansed the aura, calmed the emotions, and reminded the practitioner of their divine nature. Temples in Egypt were considered the homes of the gods. Only the highest priests and priestesses could enter the inner sanctums where sacred statues and relics were kept. But these were not just lifeless images. They were believed to hold the living essence of the deities they represented. Each day, temple rituals would begin before dawn. The high priest would bathe, wear pure white linen, and enter the sanctuary in silence. There he would awaken the god's statue, offer incense, food, and sacred words. These rituals weren't for show. They were believed to sustain the spiritual balance of the world. Without them, the connection between humans and the divine would weaken. While grand ceremonies were held in temples, ordinary Egyptians also practiced personal rituals in their homes. Shrines to Isis, Osiris, and Hathor were common. Offerings of flowers, bread, beer, or prayer were placed daily. One powerful ritual involved lighting a lamp or candle in honor of the divine. This act symbolized bringing light to darkness, wisdom to confusion, and presence to forgetfulness. Another personal ritual was bathing in sacred oils and water. This wasn't just for hygiene. It was a spiritual purification, a way to remove negative energy and prepare the body as a vessel of the soul. Major life events were marked with sacred rituals. Birth rituals welcomed the soul into the physical world with blessings from deities like Bes and Taweret. Marriage rituals united not just two bodies, but two souls under the watchful eyes of the gods. Funeral rituals, perhaps the most elaborate, helped the soul cross safely into the afterlife. During funerals, the opening of the mouth ceremony was performed on the deceased. This symbolic act allowed the spirit to speak, breathe, and live again in the next world. Prayers from the Book of the Dead guided the soul through the underworld, offering protection from danger and instruction for spiritual tests. The most mysterious rituals were not public. They were secret rites of spiritual transformation. These were practiced by priests, initiates, and adepts of the mystery schools. These rituals included chants and invocations to awaken dormant energies within, meditations in darkness to face the shadow self and emerge enlightened, symbolic death and rebirth rituals where the initiate would be buried in a tomb-like chamber and then emerge as a new being. These experiences were not metaphorical. They were real encounters with inner dimensions of the self and the cosmos. The goal was always the same: to awaken the divine spark within and remember one's true origin. What made Egyptian rituals so powerful wasn't just their form, it was their intention. Every gesture, every word, every symbol had purpose. The repetition of rituals was not mindless, it was discipline. It trained the mind to focus, the body to obey, and the heart to open. This is a key lesson for us today. Ritual doesn't have to be grand or ancient. A simple act done with love and awareness becomes sacred. Lighting a candle, saying a prayer, or even washing your hands, if done with spiritual intent, can connect you to something greater. In the Egyptian view, ritual was the bridge between the mundane and the divine. It reminded them, and now us, that every moment of life can be sacred, that we are never separate from the gods, and that within every breath lies the potential for awakening. In ancient Egypt, beyond the temples and pyramids, hidden within, quiet sanctuaries and underground chambers, existed sacred centers of wisdom known as mystery schools. These were not places of ordinary learning. They were schools of soul initiation, where chosen individuals were trained in the divine sciences: energy, healing, astrology, geometry, alchemy, and the mastery of the self. Only the most dedicated souls, those who had proven themselves morally, mentally, and spiritually, were allowed to enter. These initiates would undergo years, sometimes decades, of intense spiritual training. The goal was not just knowledge, it was transformation. The student was to be reborn as a twice-born being, one who had conquered illusion and remembered their divine origin. The mystery schools were spiritual academies that operated in places like Heliopolis, Abydos, Karnak, and most famously, the temples of Luxor and Dendera. Unlike typical religious practices, these schools went beyond rituals. They delved into the esoteric meanings behind the symbols, myths, and gods of Egypt. These schools taught sacred wisdom, passed down from the Zep Tepi, the first time, when divine beings ruled the earth. They believed this knowledge was a gift from the gods Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, being the most revered guardian of sacred teachings. Training was not just academic, it was spiritual and personal. Students were taught to master their emotions and thoughts through silence, meditation, and fasting, study the symbols of the gods, learning how each represented aspects of human consciousness, read and write in sacred hieroglyphs, which they believed carried energetic frequencies, not just words, align with cosmic cycles, using astrology to understand the flow of divine timing. One key area was sacred geometry, understanding how the universe was built through harmonious proportion. Pyramids and temples were designed using these principles, serving as tools to raise consciousness. The most important stage of training was the initiation ritual, often done in absolute secrecy. In one such rite, the initiate was placed in a sarcophagus in the chamber of the kings in the Great Pyramid. There, in darkness and silence, they would lie for 3 days and nights. This was a symbolic death, during which they would face their fears, their shadow, and the illusions of the ego. If successful, they would emerge transformed, reborn as an awakened being. They were now a son or daughter of the light, capable of seeing beyond the physical and serving as a bridge between humanity and the divine. Graduates of the mystery schools were not just wise, they were expected to serve humanity. Many became healers, philosophers, scribes, architects, and priestesses. Their work was to maintain the balance of Ma'at, teach others the path, and keep the sacred knowledge alive. They lived humble lives, bound by vows of secrecy, knowing the wisdom they carried was powerful and dangerous if misused. Though these schools eventually faded, their influence can be seen in later spiritual traditions, the Hermetic teachings, Gnosticism, Greek philosophy, and even the symbols used by secret societies today. Their core teaching remains relevant, that each human carries within them a divine spark, and through discipline, inner work, and sacred study, they can remember who they truly are. In the ancient world of Egypt, nothing was built randomly. Every structure, symbol, and inscription was based on a deeper spiritual code, sacred geometry. This wasn't just mathematics, it was the language of creation itself. The Egyptians understood that the universe was built on patterns, frequencies, and vibrations. By learning and working with these natural laws, they could connect with divine energies, harness cosmic power, and bring balance to the physical and spiritual worlds. Sacred geometry refers to geometric patterns and shapes that are found everywhere, in nature and the cosmos. The spiral of galaxies, the symmetry of a flower, the hexagon of a honeycomb, all follow divine mathematical ratios. The Egyptians believed that these patterns were the blueprints of the universe, and by building in alignment with them, they could harmonize human energy with the cosmos. It was not just architecture, it was a spiritual technology. The Great Pyramid of Giza is one of the greatest examples of sacred geometry in action. Its proportions reflect pi, pp, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. Phi, the golden ratio which appears in plants, animals, and even the human body. The Earth's dimensions. The pyramid is aligned to true north, and its proportions match the curvature of the Earth. These alignments weren't coincidence. They were intentional. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb, it was a power generator, a spiritual initiatory tool, and a cosmic receiver. It was designed to focus and amplify the Earth's natural energy fields, helping initiates elevate their consciousness during rituals. Many Egyptian temples were built on what are now called ley lines, energetic pathways that crisscross the Earth. These lines are similar to acupuncture meridians in the human body. Temples like Karnak, Luxor, and Dendera were placed exactly where Earth's magnetic and spiritual energy was strongest. When people entered these spaces, they were entering higher frequency zones. The shapes, proportions, and alignments of the rooms would gently alter the visitor's state of consciousness, helping them feel peace, insight, healing, or connection to the divine. In Egypt, symbols were more than just art. Hieroglyphs were vibrational keys. Each symbol carried a specific energy frequency. When placed together in sacred sequences, they could open doorways to other realms of consciousness. Likewise, sound was another major energy tool. Temples were built with acoustics in mind. Certain chambers would resonate with chants in a way that vibrated the body's energy centers, chakras. Priests and priestesses would use intonations and mantras to activate these spaces, turning temples into healing chambers. One of the most mysterious symbols found in Egypt is the flower of life, a geometric pattern made of overlapping circles forming a flower-like design. This symbol is found carved into the stone of the Osirian at Abydos and is said to contain the mathematics of the entire universe. According to sacred teachings, this design is the blueprint for all creation: atoms, stars, music, and even consciousness itself. The Egyptians used this knowledge to encode sacred truth into architecture, art, and ritual. The purpose of sacred geometry wasn't just to build temples. It was to teach people how to live in harmony with the divine order of the universe. By understanding shapes, proportions, sound, and symbols, humans could align with higher laws and become more aware, compassionate, and awakened. To the ancient Egyptians, sacred geometry was a bridge between the material and the mystical, tool to heal, transform, and ascend. In ancient Egypt, death was not seen as the final end, but rather as a transformation and continuation of existence. The Egyptians had a deeply spiritual understanding of the afterlife, believing that the soul embarked on a journey to the realm of the gods. The pursuit of immortality was a key driving force behind their elaborate burial practices, monumental tombs, and the rich mythology surrounding the afterlife. The Egyptians envisioned the afterlife as a journey through a series of stages that would ultimately lead to eternal life. This journey was fraught with obstacles, but also rich with opportunities for spiritual growth and transcendence. One of the most important texts to guide this journey was the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and incantations that would help the deceased navigate the challenges of the afterlife. The Book of the Dead was placed in the tomb of the deceased, often near their mummified body, and was intended to serve as a map to the afterlife, ensuring safe passage through the realms that lay beyond the physical world. One of the most famous and crucial aspects of the Egyptian afterlife is the weighing of the heart ceremony. According to Egyptian mythology, when a person died, their heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. Ma'at represented the cosmic order and the balance of the universe. If the heart was found to be light and free of sin, the soul would be granted entry into the field of reeds, a paradisiacal realm where the deceased could live in peace for eternity. However, if the heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it would be devoured by the Amit, a terrifying creature that was part crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus. In this case, the soul would face annihilation, ceasing to exist. The weighing of the heart was not just a judgment on moral behavior, but a spiritual test that reflected the soul's alignment with cosmic law and universal harmony. Central, too, the Egyptian vision of the afterlife was the god Osiris, who ruled over the realm of the dead. Osiris was once a living king, but after his death and resurrection, he became the ruler of the afterlife. He represented both death and rebirth, symbolizing the eternal cycle of life and the triumph of the soul over death. The Pharaohs, as the living representatives of the gods on earth, believed that upon their death, they would join Osiris in the afterlife and continue to rule alongside him. This belief formed the foundation of the divine kingship, in which the pharaoh was seen as a mediator between the gods and humans. Osiris's myth was particularly significant because it illustrated that the afterlife was not reserved only for the gods, but was available to all people who lived righteous lives and adhered to the principles of Ma'at. The resurrection of Osiris thus symbolized the hope for rebirth and eternal life for all Egyptians. The Egyptians believed that each person possessed two essential spiritual components, the Ka and the Ba. The Ka was the vital essence or life force, which continued to exist after death. The Ba, on the other hand, was the personality or soul which could leave the body and travel between the physical world and the afterlife. Upon death, the Ka would stay near the body, requiring food and offerings to sustain it, while the Bay would embark on its journey through the afterlife. If the Ka and Ba were able to reunite, the soul would achieve eternal life and enjoy the blessings of the afterlife. To facilitate this process, Egyptians believed in the importance of preserving the physical body through mummification, ensuring that the Ka and Ba could return to it. Tombs were filled with treasures, food, and texts that would guide and sustain the deceased on their journey. The Egyptians viewed death as part of the larger cosmic cycle of life, death, and rebirth, reflected in the daily movement of the sun. Each day, the sun would die at sunset and be reborn in the morning, symbolizing the eternal nature of the. So the sun god Ra played a central role in this cosmic cycle. Ra's journey through the underworld at night mirrored the soul's passage through the afterlife, where it would face trials before being reborn in the morning. This solar cycle reinforced the belief in immortality, both for the soul and the cosmos itself. In this sense, the Egyptian afterlife was not a place of eternal rest, but a dynamic realm where the soul would continue its evolution, learning, growing, and experiencing divine illumination. For those who passed the weighing of the heart, the ultimate reward was the field of reeds, a paradise where the deceased would live in peace and abundance. This land was described as an eternal version of the Nile Delta, with lush fields, flowing rivers, and a harmonious, peaceful existence. Here the soul would be free from the struggles of earthly life and could live in union with the gods, enjoying the pleasures of the afterlife for all eternity. In the field of reeds, the soul would be reunited with loved ones and partake in an eternal existence of peace, fulfillment, and divine connection. The ancient Egyptians' view of the afterlife was both a spiritual journey and a cosmic truth. Through the rituals, beliefs, and practices they developed, they provided a pathway for the soul's continued existence beyond the physical realm. By living in harmony with the divine order and following the principles of Maat, the soul could achieve immortality, gaining entry into the realm of Osiris and continuing to live in the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The Egyptian afterlife was not just about death, it was a reflection of the eternal quest for unity with the divine spiritual awakening and transcendence. It was a profound understanding that death was not the end but a gateway to a higher state of being, where the soul could be reborn, purified, and united with the gods in the eternal cycle of existence.